One way to enhance the look of your video projects is to use vignettes. Vignettes are these soft, somewhat darker borders around the outsides of your clips that tend to focus your viewer's attention inside the clip. They're so soft, they're so subtle that most people don't even notice they're there, which makes them all that much more effective because they really do pull people into your projects. Many videographers and colorists use vignettes as just a standard part of their workflow. They just apply them to virtually everything. So I'm going to show you a couple of different methods to add vignettes to your projects in this lesson. I'm also going to show you sort of a different take on using a vignette. Instead of a dark border, we're going to blur the background. So to see how vignettes work, go to Working Files and go to Premiere Pro Projects and go on down to Vignettes. We're going to apply a vignette to these four scenes. This shot of the coast, these two women sitting on the bench, this one woman here, and this old portrait there. The two methods we're going to use are the circle effect and a track matte key. We're going to start off with the circle effect because I want to use the track matte key in two different ways. I'll go back to the beginning here. I want to use the circle effect. So let's just take a look at the circle effect. It's under Effects, Video Effects, and it's under Generate. Now the Generate effects tend to take whatever clip you apply them to and just change them entirely. Whatever you saw there before becomes something entirely different. So I'll show you what I mean. I'll take the circle effect and drag that right to that clip, and goodbye clip. It becomes a circle. Not what we want to do. We want to have the circle on something else that reveals something below it. By the way, ellipse just adds a line rather than a filled-in circle like that. So that's why we're using circle. So I'll undo that by pressing Control-Command-Z. I want to apply that circle to something else above these guys. So the easiest thing to do is to add either a black video clip there or a black matte. So I go to the project panel and go to this new item icon there. We'll take a color matte, which we're going to make black. Click OK. And we'll take black up here. That's the default color. Click OK. I'm going to call this one Circle. Let's just take this matte called Circle and bring it on down here. We'll drag it across the entire group of clips here, like that. And now everything will be black. You won't see a thing. That's because we put this black matte on top of everything. Let's apply the circle effect to that. So I'll drag it to this clip. And now there's a little circle, which really isn't doing any good right now. We're going to fix that though. So we'll go to the Effect Controls panel like so, and let's work with Circle. I'm going to close this guy down so you can see the whole width there. First order of business is that we want to not have a circle in the middle, we want to have a hole in the middle. So I'm going to invert the circle. Now that puts a little hole in the middle of this formerly black matte. It's white because that's the color of the circle effect. Let's click on the swatch there and change it from white to black, like that. Now we're beginning to make some progress. I want to expand the size of it. But before I do that, I want to increase the size of this clip. I want it bigger than the whole frame here. So to see that, I'm going to zoom out a bit here, go to, let's say, 10%. And then I click on Motion to show that clip there. I want to make it larger. We have some room to maneuver it if we need to. So I'm going to scale it up like that. Just like that. There you go. Now we'll go back to Fit. And now let's adjust the size of the circle. So go back down the circle here, make the radius larger. Something like that. That way I can go beyond the edges or whatever and not go beyond the border of that black matte. Well, obviously, we don't want to have that circular frame there. So we turn it into an oval using the motion effect here. I'm going to go over to Scale and turn off Uniform Scale. I want to expand the width by dragging it out like that. Now we have our oval, but we want to be able to see through this. We also want it to be softer on the edges. So there are two things we need to do. First of all, we need to feather the circle. So down here in Circle, there's Feather. If I open that up, it says Feather Outer Edge. The outer edge is that edge. The inner edge is grayed out because we didn't choose a different kind of edge here from this drop-down list. These edges here add little things inside it and don't really work for our purposes. So we're going to stay with none here. I'm going to feather the outer edge like so. That's more like it. And now let's drop the opacity of this clip. Go to Opacity here. And drop the opacity down so we can see what's underneath it. Now that may not be as effective as we want. We might want to bring the size of the clip down a bit there so we can bring it in. So I'm going to change the width a little bit less than that, bring it in a bit like so. Bring the height down a bit like that. That is kind of dark for a vignette. It's a little too obvious. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit more, like that. Now, you may also think that's too subtle, right? Let me turn it off for a second. From that to that. Pretty dramatic difference. So in fact, that's a relatively dark vignette, but I want to make sure you see it. Let's take a look at the women here on the bench. Now again, your first look at this, you may think, well, there's no vignette there. And that's what you want your audience to think. You don't want them to notice the vignette. But if I turn it off, that's the before, there's the after. Again, with this face, we'll just turn it off again. Before, after. And now the portrait, it won't work the way we want it to. That's because the portrait has these hard edges, and this is a very large vignette, but we'll fix that. I'm going to cut this matte here. I'm going to move my playhead to this juncture here by pressing the up arrow. That automatically takes me to the previous edit. I want to get the razor tool. That's over here. I'll spread this out a bit. There's the razor blade tool. The shortcut for that is C. I can cut this guy right there. I want to go back to the selection tool by pressing V. Make you active. Click on that. And now I can pull it in a bit. Let's see how that works. I'm going to scale the width a little bit like this, bring it in until we see it come into the inside like that. Now it's beginning to look like we want, but we don't want this hard edge to this. Let's take the opacity and bring that back up. That's more like what we want. We don't really need to adjust the opacity here. We just want to put a nice little oval around there, make a nice vignette around this portrait. Okay, that's basically the process for using circle to create vignettes, like so. I'm going to delete this circle matte here. Select that and delete that. Now I want to use the track matte approach. And the track matte approach won't work all that well with the portrait, so we'll leave that out of this whole process. I'm going to select these first 3 clips like that. I want to lift these guys up and duplicate them, so hold on the Alt or the Option key, lift them up, and there's a duplicate version of it. I want to apply the track matte key to all these guys on top here, so I'll select all of them, go to Effects, and I'm going to go get the track matte key under Keying, and add that by just double-clicking on it. I'm also going to darken these guys to create the vignette, so this top one is going to be the vignette. So I need to go to the color correction group, and we'll get the Luma curve and apply that by just double clicking it. So now we've got Luma curve and the track matte key there. Now we need to make the matte that we're going to use for the track matte key. So we do that inside the titler. So I go to Title, New Title, Default Still, and we'll call this one Oval. And let me adjust the size of this thing a little bit. I want to create an oval here. It's very easy to do this. To create the oval, just click on the ellipse tool over there. And just go up to the upper left-hand corner here, click and drag on the lower right-hand corner, and there's your oval. Now you can always change the size of this later by using the motion effect. We'll just leave it like that. Close this down, we're done. Let's take that oval and put it on top of everything here. So go to the project panel, go get that oval right there. Let's just take the trim tool and make it all the way like that. We'll skip the portrait again because it just doesn't really work here for the portrait. The circle is your best bet for putting a nice vignette around the portrait. I need to click away and get on that one. We're going to say the matte should be on track 3. And now I'm going to turn off the bottom track so you can see what's going on. So this top clip here is opaque there and transparent here. So we're seeing the clip below it if we turn that off. I want to reverse that. I want the top clip to be opaque on the outside here. We're going to make that darker and leave this part transparent here. So I'm going to switch things. I'm going to reverse it like that. So this will be the thing that we're going to darken. And we'll darken it using the Luma curve by just pulling it down a bit like that. Then we're making it darker. I'll turn the visibility back on here. Now you see our vignette. And obviously it's not what we want to do. We don't want that hard edge, right? So we fix the hard edge by putting a blur on this top clip. You go to Effects, go to Blur and Sharpen, go get the Gaussian blur, apply it there. And we're going to make this blurry, so go back to Effect Controls. And we'll blur this guy up by doing that. We also want to repeat edge pixels so we don't get a little funny thing around the outside edge there. And we might want to adjust the Luma here a bit, so go back to U, and it's a little bit too dark, right? Something like that, just keeping it subtle. Maybe ramping up the blurriness a bit more there, something like that. I'll turn things off. I'll turn U off, and then turn this off. There's the before, there's the after. We'll go on down the line here to the women on the bench. I will select video 3. We're going to reverse it. We're going to darken things up a bit here like that. Go to this last one here. We'll take video 3, we'll reverse it and make it darker. Take a look at it. Do the after and then the before. So there are 2 basic approaches to creating a vignette. You can use the circle or you can use the track matte key. Now I want to show you one more thing, and that is how to blur the background here. We're going to blur the background around her. So to do that, we need to make a track matte. So go back to the title, new title, default still. We'll call this one blur. And this is very easy to make. We just take the pen tool, draw a border around her. So I click off to the bottom here. I'm going to click and drag so I have a little bit of a curve going on here, but you don't have to do that if you don't want. It's not going to be that precise. I'm just clicking and dragging as I make these points to have a little curve as I go along. Drag in the direction of the motion here as I move through this, down below this, and connect them back up like that. Now we've got a closed Bezier. I want to switch this to a filled Bezier. So go over here and we'll fill it up. And we're done. We're going to apply that one instead of the oval here. Get rid of the oval And we're going to go get that guy, blur on top of her like so. And we're going to take this one here and get rid of the Luma curve, delete that. And I don't want to reverse it anymore. I want to make sure that we have this be visible and let the area around the outside of her be transparent so you can see what's below that. We're going to put a blur on this now. So I go to Effects, get my Gaussian blur and put that on the bottom clip by double clicking it. And we'll blur the bottom now, like so. See how that works? Now you can see how the edges are kind of funny. You need to repeat the edge pixels like that and get rid of that. The blur is probably a bit much, but I want you to see what's going on here. Let's blur the matte. Go up here and get the Gaussian blur again. Double click on you. And we'll blur that as well. And we can repeat the edge pixels as well for you. And you begin to see that that bottom blur is probably a bit much. So we go down here and ratchet that back just a bit. So you can see we can blur the background there so we can focus our attention on the center of interest of this clip. So there you have two different ways to make a vignette, and also a way to blur the background using the track matte key method that you use to make a vignette.